Hey everyone, Anders Sundquist here, host of the podcast Lean In. And today we're going to be talking about leadership and driving outcomes. So we're going to unpack some process and systems level things, but also unpacking how did we get there with none other than Chris Brady today. So Chris runs TA at Sage, covering go-to-market, product, and tech. And I've learned a lot from our early chats and planning and prepping, Chris. I think your agency background combined with what you've built with enterprise level orgs at Sage is impressive and fun. And that acronym POPs really resonated with me. And we'll get to that in a minute. But without further ado, our audience again is people and talent leaders and their direct reports. So if you can tell everyone, how did you get to this role at Sage? What's your background in TA?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me. Super excited. I think that's one of the biggest questions I always ask people. What's your journey? How did you get here? For me, back in the mid 90s, if I can talk about how old I am,
Please, phone book era.
yeah, I started out actually working in staffing and I came across a organization that wanted to hire tech support folks. The company that I worked for at the time wanted to only place people that were like phone support or mostly secretaries at the time is what they were calling them. So admin.
Oh, yeah.
And I walked back to my office and I didn't walk, I actually drove, but got back into my car, went to the office and I landed a large deal. So it was a big project. But the best part about it, the leaders and the owner of this organization, and they were pretty big, didn't get it. They didn't understand. And so I was like, okay, what am I missing?
Yeah.
And part of it was the markup. They felt like I was ripping this company off. And they told me, find people that can do this job, pay them this amount, 15 bucks an hour, and you bill me 30. Like they told me what to do. And my
Wow.
leaders at this recruiting agency or staffing agency was like, our markup's only normally like 15%. So do you want to talk to them? And I'm like, okay,
Wait a minute. I did my job here.
yeah. And I walked in, I cold called. I literally walked in. So I got into the agency business. I was in sales right out of college, doing outside sales and other things. And somebody that I worked with interviewed a recruiting agency, and that's how I got into it.
Wow.
And then from there, so it took me about a year to figure out a lot of the mechanics. And then I ended up leading one for someone else that had multiple offices, and then got into my own. And I did that for 14 years. So I was remote before it was cool back in 1998. And then everyone else joined, and then it got kind of uncool, I guess, to where we are now. And then I dipped back into corporate in about 2012, 2014, where I was doing consulting, you know, mostly building teams and looking at how to help talent acquisition teams or business leaders solve their problems using recruiting. So sorry, that was a pretty long intro, but just wanted to give you kind of an idea of what I've done.
Well, that's really helpful. And actually, it sets the stage for what we'll talk about in a minute and how things have changed. We were just joking about this from the phone book era and calling, in the evening and, talking to wives and getting referrals from where did you interview and calling into those companies. And really what all of that taught me, I started in the agency world too with one of the largest staffing companies nationally, was learning that grit, learning that resourcefulness. And I think in some ways, AI today helps us, but it might be hurting us in some ways where maybe there's some atrophy with some of those raw skills. And we'll talk a bit about how that differs here. And it's a nice segue really from agency and founding world to internal TA teams. And, you run a pretty large TA team at Sage. If you want to tell us about the scope of your current TA team and kind of what you look for in terms of profiles of someone who does well and ramps up quickly at Sage, that would kind of segue nice into pops here.
Okay. Yeah. So my current team is I'm managing managers, and then I've got a total team of about 30 people globally. So for me, I got into this because I've always liked people. And so I was in sales because I enjoyed people. I just like meeting people. I enjoy the conversation. So, part of probably the most fun thing about my current role is that I'm working with people in South Africa, Spain,
Very cool. Global.
India, all over the place, right? So our core at Sage, our core, I'd say locations were based out of the UK, and then North America is a big driver for us. So, but at the end of the day, when I'm hiring people, that grit piece, it's just something I can't do without. Like I just can't have people that can't show up. But it's also, I kind of want to know, like in the interview process, tell me about a time when you had to overcome something, personal or business, because I kind of want to just cut through all the bull crap.
Yeah.
I want to get to
Rehearsed
know
answers.
them,
Right. Right.
but really know what makes them tick. And the Indeed CEO, I read an article that he was asking anyone that interviewed with him, tell me about something that you are ultra fired up about, like you're super excited about. And he's like, I kind of want them to talk about something in their personal life. Business stuff, boring. Everyone else on my team's already screened them. So when they get to me, he's like, and I talked to somebody that was building, she was super excited about sourdough bread.
Oh, there you
And
go.
she went on and on about 57 different recipes that she did. And he was like, how can I take that
Yeah.
and get them that focused and excited about work? If I can do that, then I've created somebody that I leave them alone and watch them. Right.
Yeah.
And
It's just
that's,
unharnessed energy. Yeah.
yeah. And so that's kind of what I've done in my career. I'm not we have the ultimate system in the process and we just follow that and everyone does the same. That's not me. Like if you work on my team, if I've interacted with you, you'll know. And even in the interview process, I'll kind of give them an idea. Here's some of the challenges we have right now. How would you solve that?
Oh, great.
Because if you come on my team, I'm going to want you to solve it. I'm not the person that thinks I know everything. And I think the other piece of that is the transparency of when you make a mistake, you got to own it. You're a
Accountability. Oh,
leader.
yeah.
If you want people to follow you and you want to be somebody that they trust, you got to sometimes make fun of yourself. That's okay. And you're not thinking you know everything because, being a leader, it's not always being right.
Yeah.
And I know you've worked with people, I'm sure, that think the opposite of that and they can't ever show anything that doesn't look like it's right. And I'm the opposite of that. And if you ask anybody on my team, I'm going to be the first person to say, man, I totally messed this up. And you create that following, and then you have people come and they'll follow you from one company to the next because you know what, at the end of the day,
That's
that
loyalty.
person's got my back.
Yep, that's loyalty. And I've seen that with strong TA leaders time and time again, and clearly something that you bring to the table. And that must be a result of this leadership playbook. We talked a bit about what that looks like and these core things that you have in your leadership playbook. I really want to give you the chance to unpack more about what that looks like. You just touched on some things like authenticity, but even more so on the driving outcomes. So how do you drive outcomes for your TA team? How do you motivate the team to do day in and day out the gritty role of sourcing and hiring talent?
Okay, no, it's a great question. And I think, the transparency piece, you can't fake, but
Yeah.
it's also the time you spend. If you don't spend any time with the recruiter, it's so hard to sound real and authentic. I'll tell you this story. I won't mention any names, but a lot of times when you're in talent acquisition, you report into HR leaders, and sometimes they'll move them over or move them from talent management or somewhere else to manage a team. And so I once had a leader that we just implemented a new ATS, and I'm selling the team on this. I'm like, guys, you gotta get involved. You gotta know this because it's going to change. And we were moving from one product to next. And this leader would join the call and he kept saying, make sure when you go into the system that you're using hashtags. And I kept messaging him outside of that saying, please stop calling it hashtags. Just tell them that they need to tag the candidates. And so because the recruiters are messaging me, I can see them looking at me like,
Yeah. Wait,
hashtagging, what are we on TikTok? What are we
what
doing?
is this, Twitter? Yeah.
Yeah, right. Or whatever, right? And so I think that piece of it, number one is the people, right? So how do you drive outcomes? For me, my style is I'm going to find the best people that'll figure out a way to win and set goals, because you can't, be doing anything worth anything unless you're tracking it, like, because no one would know. But it's also in today's, era that we live in, you got to understand your brand. What do other people think about you? What do they think about your team? When you join a meeting, are you focused on outcomes? And if you did a poll after the call, what do they think about you? And so that's a big thing that I try to impart into my team. But that's the people. So that's the first part. The next part is the operations. So do you have people on your team that have done the recruiting job before? Because if they're coming from somewhere else, they can pick it up, but they still won't understand. Everyone knows the famous metrics for KPIs for talent acquisition: time to offer, time to fill, right? And if I sit in a meeting with a president of a business or a leader, they don't care. They literally don't care. So stop bringing your dashboards with things that don't matter to them. They want to know, how am I going to meet my revenue goals? How am I going to deliver my product? And talent is such a big part of that. So it's aligning that, but you have to do that amongst your team, because your team is going to depend on the operations folks. And if you're messaging them and asking for a request and they send you something back that you can't use, you're like, now I have to do this myself. And that's what the recruiters are thinking. And we actually put in an enablement team back, I think it's been 2 years now. And that was such a great move by my leader, our VP of TA. And I think from that team, it's all ex-recruiters.
Well, there you go.
So, and understanding that and saying your job is to enable this team to do their job better. When we're noticing problems in the, and the other piece of that is the process. Noticing, are we doing this wrong? Is there a better way to do this? Is it interview scheduling? Are we approving the requisitions the right way? And then the last one would be systems, which, you can't win the Indianapolis 500 when you're driving a Yugo, or maybe old reference.
we got to have the right infrastructure in place.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I think you're never going to show up and have all those running 100%, but you got to have a couple of them running. Otherwise, your team is going to be like, you join meetings and they just look like they've been through World War IV or something, right?
Bags under their eyes. Well,
Yes.
Say more about, I think this is really important people understand what you just unpacked here. There's a lot here. POPS is the acronym.
Yep.
People, operations, process, and systems. And we could talk for an hour on each of these alone. You unpacked, getting the right people on the bus, which is an old adage in any business, is step one. And then the operations, and it sounds like at Sage you implemented, TA enablement. Say more about before enablement and after. So what was the old operation, or how were things before, where clearly something needed to be optimized? Clearly your VPTA saw an opportunity to improve those operations and processes and systems, but just touch on what it was like before and how things have been optimized.
Yeah. So this new model of doing more with less.
Oh yeah.
It's been around for a couple of years now, hardcore. And so you got to try to figure out what things have synergies in them. How do we standardize what we do? What I don't want is a hiring manager to attend a strategy meeting with a recruiter and it's different. There's going to be some nuances in Germany and Spain and wherever else, like if you have works council and other areas, but the core foundation of what we do: show up to the call, have already done research, we have profiles that we're sharing. The quicker that we can get into that hiring manager's brain and know, what are you actually looking for? And we can also stop some of the bias right away and some other things that we know immediately. If we pull up the profile and like, you know what? I don't want to see anyone that's not at Yale University.
Yeah. Only Ivy Leagues. There you go. That's a class.
Right. And so things like that, but also it's getting them aligned to that process. And if you don't have that consistency across your team, it's very difficult, because some recruiters are going to do it at a high level. And then others are just like, okay, great. We got 5 minutes here. I'm going to ask you 3,000 questions. Give me the answers. And then I'm just going to submit resumes to you and just get back to me whenever you can.
Yeah. It's
because
brave.
that's what you see a lot of, I think, unfortunately. And so it's a balance too, because you got to understand the business that you're in as well. If you are working and supporting customer support, they don't need a grandmaster sourcing champion. They need somebody that can align to a process, get everybody on board, and then hold everyone accountable and make decisions quickly. Like, we got to move. So you got that speed and velocity piece. But I think that that's the kind of the special sauce to it, is understand who you're talking to, what are they trying to achieve, and the other thing, so the standardization is a big piece. The other thing is having a resource for your recruiters. Like, our team created the enablement team created a toolkit.
Oh, sure. Like an internal toolkit.
Yeah, so okay, I'm a recruiter in the UK, and whatever the situation is, I need to open up, or I need to do something in France.
Okay.
And the French recruiting team, they're slammed. So how do I work in France? And we've all have all that documentation now. So the other piece is, you got to be able to hire people that can follow directions and figure things out, and message if they want, but it's not a hand-holding thing. It's that
Yeah.
skill set outside
Yeah.
of the grit, figure things out for yourself, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that leads to, I think, the systems piece. So you've built out this documentation, and it's, wherever that's accessible with the repository internally. You have this stack, this infrastructure that you probably review annually as there's
Yeah.
renewals coming up, and evaluate if there's a better alternative. We were just talking about some of the Copilot sourcing tools, and what are you
Yep.
using for scheduling, and
Yep.
is your ATS providing value still, and all of these things. One of the interesting kind of next gen strategies that I've heard. This is kind of a curveball topic, but you're talking about, can the UK team find information about spinning up in France, and this topic of having an internal GPT, so some repository that's centralized on, whether it's ChatGPT or some other LLM, type product, but a searchable repository or GPT of internal institutional knowledge that lets a consolidated, almost neural network for a company be embedded within this organization. And this is a new way of doing things. I'm curious if you've thought about that or evaluated that, if that's something on the AI landscape that Sage is looking at.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're always looking to improve ourselves. The challenge I find is, you have all these disparate systems.
Yeah,
And so,
fragmented, right?
how do we
Yeah,
connect them? Because they're all over the place.
yeah,
And asking them, okay, for instance, like on the go-to-market side or performance marketing side, we're hiring sales development reps, business development reps, and there's a role play within that process. How do we assess them? Do we have the right solution to do that? A lot of it's manual, with recruiters doing a lot of the heavy lifting. We're trying to offboard some of that to other teams
got it.
to take away some of the admin work. But at the end of the day, the recruiter is still accountable for the hire in regards to what we do, the talent that we bring in. The hiring manager is the overall owner of the hire. So they can't point and say, you know what, we really messed up on this one, and I like when they say we and not you.
Yeah, there's less of this finger pointing.
Right? But I think that's something, for us to think about, of how do we automate that, because you got the surveys and you got all these other things going on. But in a perfect world, the recruiter logs into their system and it says, hey, great to see you. Happy Friday. I need you to do these 5 tasks.
Well, there you go.
And that's, we're not there yet, but that's where we're trying to go to, of more of helping you manage your day. Because, I think the number one thing online that I see that people complain about talent acquisition and recruiting is ghosting and not getting back. And you've got two sides to the story. You have the recruiter saying, I had 1 million people apply to these jobs, and it'd be nice if the system would disposition them or do other things. So that's one side. And the other side, the poor candidates are applying, they don't hear back. And for us, if you interview at our organization, you're getting a phone call. Like, that's something that is non-negotiable. We're going to call.
Wow.
If we can tell you
Yep.
exactly where you missed the bar, we're going to do it. There's some touchy situations where you can't, but we're trying to empower our team to give people and help them throughout the process. Because it's not just us trying to hire talent off the industry,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I want to make that experience something that they remember and go, you know what? I didn't get that job, but man, I really like that team. I love what they're doing, and I will think about that. It's just like having a product that
Yeah.
people go, whoa, that was amazing. And I could probably think of 5 things that I can think off the top of my head, but I'm interacting with a lot of products in my day-to-day whatever that I'm like, ooh, I'm not going to go online and snitch and go on
You're not
Yelp.
going to write a positive review. There's a short list of
Yeah,
positive reviewable products where you're like passionate about it. And I think, what you're talking about, that candidate feedbacks, say more on how you empower and coach your TA team on giving that feedback. I have to say, in this day and age, I feel like it's more of a becoming increasingly rare for
yeah.
risk and legal reasons. And I would imagine Sage has an incredible candidate experience, candidate feedback loop because of that, and probably a high referral engine because if people, even if they don't get the role, at least they feel like there was high engagement. And so then, referring a friend would be the next logical step. But how do you coach, as a leader and then drive a positive outcome, North Star topic, with this feedback?
Yeah, so we're another team that we work with is our employer branding team. We're doing surveys and we're looking through those surveys and
There you
saying,
go.
okay, who missed the mark or who went above and beyond? Look what this feedback is telling us. So I think, and then we're sitting down with the recruiters. We're not
Yeah.
sharing everything. We're
Spending
trying to
that
do
time.
aggregate data, but we're being real, having a real conversation and
Yep.
saying, hey, you know what? Next time, don't show up to the, you know, phone interview with after you ate black beans and they're all in your teeth. I'm just kidding. That did not happen. But, seriously though, there's that piece of it. And the recruiters are in a hard job because sometimes they're caught in between
Yep.
things that are going on behind the scenes and they're trying to do the best job that they can, but you got internal mobility, people moving around in organizations, and there's a lot of other things. But I really know we've got all these different compliance issues. So we've got GDPR and then we've got OFCCP. And I don't know if you recently saw I think it was in the last 2 days online, but the whole Workday
No, say more.
news. So there's somebody that's suing Workday right
Okay.
now that they'd applied to hundreds of jobs and they're over 40 years old and they didn't get the job. And so they're looking at all that data and saying, is there built-in bias in
Bias.
Workday's platform? And so that might open up some other things because there is a judge in California that is allowing it to go forward. I think that, so I was thinking this, personally myself going, how would we handle this? Like, because are we liable as an organization or is the product liable? But there's so many pieces to this. It's not just so cut and dry
It's not cut
because
and dry, right?
let's be honest, we live in a world where there's bias. If you think there's no bias in our world, then great, you live in an amazing life. But we see it and we're trying to influence it and make sure, and I'll give you a good example with our kickoff strategy meetings or recruiting strategy meetings.
Yeah. Yeah.
When we're doing those meetings, we've got a very specific process that we follow, an outline that we want filled out by the recruiters because we want to make sure we're consistent, but
Yeah.
we're asking the right questions. Like, for instance, if you're the hiring manager and we're doing a little role playing, I'm going to ask you, tell me a little about your team. And
Sure.
I'm going to pull up your org chart and I'm going to talk about, okay, you got 30 people on your team. How do you feel like as far as your team? Do you feel like you have the right talent on your team? Did you hire all these people on your team?
Yeah.
And if you're only hiring men, if let's say it's 29 out of 30, I'm going to ask them, did you hire them or did somebody else? Let's talk about your interview process and walk them through. And this is not a shaming them, but I want to talk to them about how to create a higher performing team. And we're going to do that by bringing in people that aren't like you, right? And that's, I mean, when you're interviewing, you got to know your bias. You got to understand, like, I'm going to want people that like to talk, are outgoing, that like
Yeah.
to have fun.
Yeah.
So the
Put
best
your own
hire for
playbook
me,
preference. Sure.
yeah.
Sure.
So the best hire for me is somebody that's really boring that hates people. I'm
Yeah.
just kidding.
Yeah.
But seriously though, the more people that I hire in my team that are like that,
Yeah.
the stronger our team and the stronger our performance. And I don't really, it's not a gender thing to me. It's not a color thing. It's based on, if you think about what are you missing?
It's like the archetype,
Yeah.
the intangibles of someone who will do well on your team and agnostic of where they come from, what they look like. It's this like skill of how they'll be able to adapt and perform. And it sounds like ties into that leadership and driving outcomes. And you have an interview rubric, you have these soft and hard skills that will work well. And coming in our prep calls coming into this, you were talking about some of those things. The word grit kept coming up as a skill. It's almost it's a soft skill, almost a personality trait, really. And both of us have come from agency backgrounds, and
Yeah.
I think that it's not uncommon that TA leaders will say, "I want someone who has maybe an agency background, then spend some time in house
Yeah.
and understands process, operations, and systems."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that is the right person. Pops being the kind of profile summary, and so it seems like you've found that archetype and really dialed that in at Sage for who will be successful. I guess I'm curious if you were to give feedback, to a TA or people leader tuning into the show today on how they can fine tune or optimize their archetype internally. Maybe they haven't looked in the mirror for a while. What would you say to them about, as they look at building their team for the future, how can they do that?
So, there's a lot of different ways you can do it. One is obviously surveys, have real conversations with the business. One of the questions, so 2 years ago, I was like, okay, I'm looking at all this data, I'm looking at all these surveys, but what do people really think?
Okay.
Because a lot of times they're not going to tell you, and depending on how good your survey is. So
Yeah.
we ended up hiring a person to write our job postings because they were terrible. And one of the managers on my team at the time said, you know what? I'd love to have another recruiter, but you know what we really need here? We need somebody to be able to write these to make them not only sound better, but also build our kind of our funnel and doing it away from a branding standpoint. So we hired her and she's phenomenal. And, one of the challenges is as leaders is always helping people, bring them into your organization, and then watching them flourish and leave.
Yep. Yep.
Didn't leave our organization, but had to go to a global job. And I'm like, great, she can influence more. But I sat down with her and I said, what should we do for a survey? And one of the questions was, how would you rate the current team at Sage from a TA standpoint compared to other organizations that you've been at?
Brutally honest. Okay.
And it was good feedback. And again, since I know a lot of the leadership, I don't know everyone. You can take some things with a grain of salt. Because the other question we asked was, who was your recruiter? Because if they can't tell me who the recruiter was, I don't really care what they think because
there's no signal. Yeah.
Right. But I think that's a great way to do it.
Yeah. It's like the 360 feedback, almost like the Netflix no rules, maybe a page from that book, if you will, which is, it's just radical transparency, not being afraid to peek in any corner of the business, get that feedback, take it to heart, and then make a, action-oriented, data-driven change to the organization if necessary.
And also ask the recruiters.
Yeah.
I will ask anyone that will answer me.
That'll listen. Yeah.
I don't care if they're scheduling interviews. I don't care if they're an intern that we just hired to do something else. How do you see things?
Fair.
And I want to know, because the more crowdsourced information I have, the better I can do on my job to go and, is that true?
Yeah.
And for us, I think leaders, you just got to own it. Like,
yeah.
Are you holding yourself accountable? There's a book out there called Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, and ex-Navy SEAL guy. You've probably seen him.
Oh, I've seen him. Yeah.
Yeah. Most people know who he is, but there's no one coming to help you. You are owning it, and you need to own it, and you got to show that in the way that you lead. And I think I'm trying to think of how he phrased it. So somebody in your team comes to you and complains about something.
Yeah. There's noise here. Check on this. Yep.
Like, so it's like, so like, what are you going to do about it? Not, because that's the biggest thing. You can complain all you want, and I'm guilty just like everybody else. But I think I've gotten to the point where I'm trying to be, the older I get, more clinical, less emotional. Okay, great, totally understand. How do we get to the outcome that we want, and not pointing fingers or doing all the other things?
Well, it's the in one of our earlier calls, I really liked what you described as standing up for your team. You're taking accountability, and I think it's not uncommon to see blame shifting and finger pointing as a TA or people leader, maybe to business or to the finance, or the budget wasn't there, or we missed headcount because of this, or what have you. But one of the things that I enjoyed hearing was standing up for the team in those boardroom level meetings and being able to talk about what it's really like, boots on the ground. And you mentioned this earlier, was like spending time with the team. The team today, the sourcers and recruiters, have a fundamentally different role with different problems than they did last year and 2 years ago, and then before the do more with less era. And one of the things that they're experiencing is, and for better or for worse, AI has just changed the recruiting game. Video calls with fraudsters now. There's a job posted, 12 hours later, 1,000 applicants. How do we sift through that? How can we meaningfully give feedback to each candidate? We have different problems today. And it sounds like, there's a phrase by Brene Brown. It's like getting in the arena, which means feeling the pain of your team
Yeah.
and knowing what they're going through. I guess if you were to talk to the TA leaders today, or if you were to speak to the audience today, I should say, on like, what are the problems you're seeing, the new challenges today, right? Q2 2025, that weren't around a year or two ago, that they should be aware of. Maybe if their org is bigger and they're a little separated from the daily problems, what would you say to those TA leaders? Like, hey, my team's seeing this. It's kind of tough out
Yeah, I think the one that I always see is always a challenge is the forecasting piece.
there. Oh, okay.
So we are in a era right now where velocity and solving problems is at another level.
Yeah.
And part of that is holding yourself accountable, but also the business accountable. And not everyone wants to do that. Not everybody wants to sit in front of a executive vice president and say, well, let me tell you what's really going on.
Yeah.
And let me show you the data. And the whole thing is you can cut through everything with the data and say, well, technically, you guys interviewed, or girls, whatever team, you interviewed 300 people and you hired two. Let me walk you through all of the pieces of data to get there. But I think that's part of it, is that, the other thing that this past year we've really turned up the dial on with all the leaders on my team is those meetings where we are having a connect meeting with finance,
Yeah.
with the people business partners and the business leader. And we are lock in step. It's no longer, hey, you know what? We're going to hire 100 people. When do you think you can have those people start? September or June 1st or the 2nd? And so we are with them. And I've got some awesome leaders on our team. And we've turned this into us being order takers to now we're driving. How did we do that? We did that with data. We've got dashboards. Another good example of that is, so in a TA leader job, you are constantly trying to prioritize your day, but you're also trying to prioritize what your energy and what your team is focused on. And so for us, in most organizations, go to market is going to be the king of the prioritization. So which roles do we turn on? Which do we turn off?
Yep.
And how do we bring in more revenue? Okay. And so we sat down, me and one of the leaders on the team, and we looked at how do we identify a role that is a QBR role. So it's got a revenue target on it. And once we define that, okay, we're going to meet weekly and we are prioritizing those roles, because not every region you can separate product and tech and go to market and corporate. Like, for instance, like in our organization, there's a language barrier in certain countries. So those recruiters that work on our team, they're working on everything.
Wow.
And so
Hopefully. Yeah.
part of that is, we just had 2 weeks ago a recruiter show up to a strategy meeting and the person didn't speak English. And the recruiter that showed up works in another country and she speaks two languages, or three, but this wasn't the language you knew.
No, we need
So
straight.
we had to stop the call and reassess ourselves. But
Yeah.
that's something that we've really dialed in. And once you show that to executive leadership, we are all on top of these sales roles. Actually, we're on it just as much as the sales leadership is, and we're so focused on it. But if you don't do that, you can't talk details about each thing. And what we've done is everything is, we're still in Excel with a lot of these things, but they're shared spreadsheet. Oh, you want access to it? Here you go. And then they go, you know what? Because we had a problem in one of the countries that we were trying to solve for. They're like, hey, let's do a bi-weekly meeting. And this was like one of our, I'd say 2 or 3 number person in our organization. Then he wanted to be, because it was such a revenue blocker. After one call and 2 weeks in, he's like, we're good.
Wow. Back
But
to the
it's,
process piece.
yeah, because that goes back to, do we have the right data? Are we showing the right data? And using that data to identify,
Yeah.
where's the bottleneck?
Yeah.
And that's like your day to day. If you're, especially in go to market, but in most, I'd say, areas, that's your bread and butter every single day. And the better you get at that, I don't care how good you are with relationships, at some point they're going to go, love that person, but you know what? We're not delivering.
Well, and it sounds like the partnership, as you said, with the business and with finance is increasingly important, especially coming out of this, Zerpa era. Now we're doing more with less. And, it's an anthem I keep hearing with TA
Yeah.
leaders like yourself. And it sounds like that's one of the things that's changed, is really a focus when we're talking budgeting, forecasting, capacity planning, headcount planning. What resources does TA need? What's your ratio of full-time and contractors to get there?
Yeah.
Can we scale up and down efficiently? And ultimately, are we going to make these hires on time, right? It sounds like the partnership is increasingly important. That's what's changed from then, 2020s, to now. What's your crystal ball say for a year from now, 3 years from now, in terms of how things will change as a TA leader when you plan for your organization? When you look at POPs and in 36 months, how will that be different as a TA leader at Sage or in any tech company?
I think what I see is, as AI is starting to mature and technology is starting to mature, there's going to be things that it works for, but there's also going to be things that it doesn't work for. We talked about LinkedIn messages, and if you just send a normal human message to somebody, even if you misspell things, they will respond
Yeah.
a lot quicker than, I, I saw that you are like,
Yeah.
I pretend I'm an AI when I read it, because it sounds to me, I know exactly how they sent it to me,
Yeah.
and thinking that I'm going to respond to it
Yeah.
is hilarious. But
Yeah.
I think that that's where I see the industry going. There has to be human to everything you do, but it's also based on the business outcomes. And as you grow in your career in TA, you're solving problems, and a lot of the problems you solve for aren't necessarily TA problems. So we've got a great partnership with our people team. I mean, we're on part of the people team, but I mean, like, our people business partner team. Most people call them HR. When we get on calls, we get on meetings, we're interlocked. We already know going into the meeting what we want to achieve from it. And that's such a different look than some organizations where you got to watch your back when you get on the meeting, and you're like,
Yep.
and you have the person in the chat going, I totally understand. And you're like, yeah, you've been blocking me for 5 years now on this, so I know you understand. But seriously, like, I think that's where I see TA leaders way more partnering with the business, but also, you've got this, you're a practitioner of a certain
Yep.
skill set,
Yep.
but what else can you be involved in and add value in? And it's not just in your little stay in your lane piece. And we've done that across, our marketing side, performance marketing, sales side, but then on the product. And I just think it comes down to, technology will continue to improve,
Yes.
but you got to pilot it, and you got to also take accountability when it's doing the opposite of that. So, anyone listening to this, do your best. Send me your best AI message, and I'll
Ooh, challenge accepted. I think
maybe I'll read it and look at it, but that's something that that I know LinkedIn's working on, and there's some other areas
Yeah.
for them to get better. But I think it's the sourcing piece, the interview scheduling piece. Those are things that can easily be picked up and automated, but it has to be done with that lens of a recruiter and not a systems analyst over somewhere else going, oh, this will be much easier for them. And then the end user looks at it and is like, yeah, I don't want to interact with that message at all.
Yeah, I think just to extend on that, I agree. I think I'm hearing a theme that AI is empowering TA teams to automate manual workflows and focus more on relationships and closing and ultimately being like a business partner. And there's sourcing tools out there for better or for worse that are full co-pilot and they work really well. And some teams are turning them on and seeing results, but others are opting for a more human in the loop type sourcing tool experience where there's still agentic features like you can give prompts and job descriptions and then an agent can source for you and you can get short lists or even outbound and then ultimately a calendar full of calls. But I think this just drives to the beginning of the call. You mentioned something about you're in this TA role because of the people and the relationships, and me too. And I think that AI will empower TA teams to focus more on relationships. That's what I think will happen 36 months from now. And I think, yeah, manual tasks will be automated, and I think we'll learn to use AI tools just like we learned to use sequences and automation in the 2000s, right? And
Yep.
then our ecosystem of apps, we started in the phone book era, right? And I think we were actually dialing into a phone on our shoulder, and we've evolved since then, but we've still built on those relationships. So
And if you think about the ordering food, here's a good
okay,
analogy. Do you order food on the app, and then when you pick it up, do you care what you're eating? Right. So because there's you can go to the restaurant and wait in line.
yeah,
Let's pick on Chipotle. I eat Chipotle. I love burritos.
sure,
So but there's certain locations that I go to that it's a better experience. Why is that? Like, is it the process? Is it the people literally making the burrito? What is it? And they've shifted. I don't know if you saw this, but they have tried to go to the quick service model,
okay,
right? And so they're trying to do things faster. So when you go to buy a burrito, you're not waiting in that line with everybody else. If you've ordered it online, they have a whole separate burrito making station
okay,
because they want you to have a quick service experience, and they're doing tons of volume because all those customers that were waiting in line before are like, I'm here, help me
yeah,
here, stop taking those online orders. But if you think about it that way, it's the same thing with recruiting. Are you headhunting candidates and bringing them into the process,
yep,
or is it the same experience for them as every person that's applied online, regardless of whether they are fit or not? I mean, you can't talk to every person for people, especially that don't meet the job requirements,
yep,
but
it's impossible.
are your job requirements specific? Are you know what you're looking for? And is it very clear so that when people read that, they don't just apply and go, oh, yeah, you know what? I could be great at this job.
Yeah, and then get 1,000 applicants per role, and that signal to noise ratio is way off.
Yeah.
And here we are with these problems of today. And so we covered a lot of ground today. I think in summary, if you're tuning in and you were taking notes, or if you fast forwarded to the end, the POPs acronym really resonated with me from the beginning, Chris. So thanks for that. The people, operations, process, and systems. And if there's one thing I've seen be true, it's certainly TA has evolved to be more systematic and operations heavy. That's how we're finding success today, partnering with the business and partnering with finance. So I want to say thank you. Much gratitude for joining the Lean In podcast. It's been a fun time. Thanks,
Yeah.
everyone.
Thanks for having me. Cheers.
Take care.